my class were working on fractions while I was on placement. They had only just sort of been introduced to it. They were still really confused with equivalent fractions. They hadn't yet learned how to add or subtract fractions. They were working towards multiplying. So because during my placement it was actually all sort of based on Anzac Day, all the literacy classes were based on Anzac Day, so we tried to keep that theme for this activity. So we were making Anzac biscuits using measuring cups, but we were only using quarter cups and whole cups and teaspoon for the measurement. So then they had to work out how many times they would use this for the recipe, for example. So I stuck to just the original recipe, but it could have been made more complicated by converting the fractions into some into decimals or some into just like a more confusing fraction like 4/8 instead of a half to kind of throw them off. But because they were all still really struggling with just the basics of fractions, I stuck to the original recipe, which only really had quarters, halves, 3/4, and whole cups. So during the activity, the kids got to have goes at measuring and working out how much that would actually be, like how many times they would need to use the one measuring cup, while another kid would actually be reading the fraction. So everyone sort of had a turn at reading the fraction and having a go at measuring. So there was a quarter cup of brown sugar. I'll just sort of give you an idea of what I did. So they would measure out with the 1/4 cup. They would all kind of decide which cup they would use and how many times they needed it. And they all kind of tried to, like, I'd always ask them, do you think that's right? So then the rest of the class says, oh no, I reckon you should use that cup, or yeah. So quarter cup, that was for brown sugar. And then we had half a cup of caster sugar. So here they had to decide, do I use half of the whole cup or do I use 2/4, use the quarter cup twice, which, because I made sure the 1 cup didn't have any other lines on it for them to measure half, because I wanted them to use the quarter cup to understand that 2/4 is equivalent to a whole. So then they would use that one twice. And yeah, during this process, like, we tried to incorporate the literacy side of things, so like why we are working with the Anzac biscuits, why they come about, why they did used to send it to soldiers. And this is also a good activity because, like, some of the students were pretty comfortable with cooking, so they're able to relate the fractions to at home measuring, whereas for some students they found it very difficult because they hadn't really done it at home. But like, creating a fun sort of engaging activity and pretty supportive that no one really felt like, because they didn't know that they were getting things wrong, like, they still felt comfortable because there was other students that were helping out. It wasn't really a hands up activity to answer the question. It was kind of either I selected someone or someone would yell out, which was fine in this sort of activity. So when they were faced with 3/4 cups, they had to realise they would use this 3 times. I reckon that's where they probably struggled the most, as soon as it starts to get almost to a whole. But yeah, overall it was very successful. I did this, it was a rotation, so I got to do small groups. Everyone sort of got a turn rolling and doing the mixtures and stirring and stuff. And I just think it was very good activity mixed in with the other fraction activities. Yeah.